Ah, how ruthlessly annoying, eh? How ruthlessly annoying. Well, let's see if anybody actually comes back. It'll be nice if people come back. It's very irritating that my internet blinks out. And it is just like a little blink out, right? Hey, buddy, how you doing? How you guys doing? Brilliant. Always good that when people come back, man. When people come back, here in Canada, we spend the most amount of money for our internet services, and we get the absolute worst service. And this is true across the board now. Like it's becoming more and more obvious. It's becoming kind of embarrassing. Like we don't. It's just a stupid internet blink out. I always like to say, like, it's the CIA saying time to pull the plug, right? Got to pull the plug when I start telling them the truth. I cut too close to the bone, right? Like, you start saying we're here in spite of the capitalists, not because of them, and that's a little too close to the bone, right? Gotta blink the internet out for a bit. Make sure that nobody can actually listen to that. That's obviously not true, but I do worry about, like, so much of our systems are becoming automated, right? That the automation and the AI systems that operate behind a lot of what we're doing, like, it would be very easy to just do like a McCarthy-style purge of leftists. It'd be easy to do, and they might not even know that it happens when it happens, right? That, like, I could turn my stream on one day and, like, you guys would come in here and it would be like this small group of us, and, like, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that I've already been shadow banned. Like, I'm already, like, completely deprioritized. Like, YouTube doesn't spread me around, like, none of this kind of stuff. That, again, the gains that I'm making on the channel seem to be done in spite of the capitalist structure, not because of it, right? In spite of what YouTube has done. And there's also another aspect to this, which, like, I do suspect that YouTube is working against leftists and working against these types of people online. But it seems to me like leftists do this as well. Like, leftists seem pretty interested in eating themselves. Like, it seems very difficult to actually get leftists to actually organize together on any kind of principle to do anything. I feel quite fortunate that I'm part of an organization, Socialist Action, which actually does take to the streets and protest, which actually does join protest movements. Like, when I have one, we got one coming up. If you're here in Toronto, we got one October 13th, 3 p.m., College and Yonge Street. It's going to be a 2-hour protest. We're going to block the street and not let people through. And because, hey, isn't poverty stupid? Have you noticed how fucking stupid poverty is? Have you noticed how ridiculous it is that it exists in the society at all? And have you noticed how easy it would be to resolve? Like, it would be so easy to resolve poverty in our society. Like, it would be cheaper to do it to do than what we're doing now. We just choose not to. We're just not interested, right? And that's bearing out in this conversation here, right? Like, how about instead of having police officers just murder people in the streets, you actually take care of your citizens? Not interested. Yeah, I just had a blink out loaf, that's all. Just walked away for a bit, came back to no stream, was confused. Yeah, my internet just went boop. Because here in Canada, we pay the most, we get the least. It's so here's a terrifying clip. Let's do the terrifying clip. Uh-oh. Did the blink out ruin everything? So it's just like being displayed right in front of us, right? Like, we're supposed to actually like look at this and be like, oh wow, it's so cool. Oh, let's celebrate it. Look, it's part of our cheerleading routines. And oh, isn't that so cute and fun? Ha 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 ha. Like, put a little shoulder cannon on this thing, right? Like a little like, you know, a Gatling gun or something, right? And you're gonna end up with like the villain from RoboCop, the robot villain, right? The Ed 2000 or whatever, right? Like, halt, you have been detected as a crime, right? Like, just wait until you're gonna have to start showing identification to these fucking things, right? Like, wait for that shit to start happening. Like, that's coming. Like, I don't know why we're fooling ourselves. Like, it's here. It's already here. It's being designed to do, like, cutesy little dances so that everybody's like, oh, they're so cute and innocent. Oh, my God. Ha, 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 ha. They're going to have, like, facial scan recognition. They're going to have, like, QR code scanners, like, things like this. And these things are going to have weapons and shit, right? You have 30 seconds to comply. It'll start with tasers, right? They'll put tasers on them first, right? Just to make sure that when they make mistakes, because they will, because they're robots, that the people that they're shooting aren't necessarily going to die for sure. So they'll start by tasing them. And, like, you think our police forces are unaccountable? Wait until these things are in operation, right? Like, they already make all kinds of excuses. Oh, it's a tough job, and, like, people have to make, you know, harebrained, have to make instant decisions. They can't get it right every time. Well, wait until it's a fucking robot that's doing it. Then they'll just be like, yeah, we're always addressing the programming and trying to work things out for the security of this, right? Like, these robots are coming, dude. Like, they're here. And the idea, they'll be deployed first in war zones. That's where they'll put them. Like, this kind of thing will be walking down the streets of, like, Iraq, right? And it'll just, like, you know, halt, show me your papers. Like, absolutely. And then once it proves itself on the streets of Iraq and Syria and these places, then you'll see it walking down the streets of, like, Chicago, Los Angeles. Yeah, absolutely, that's going to happen. And to think otherwise, I think, is just kind of like a little, like, boop, boop. I think you got to be a little out to lunch. Because, like, any step that the United States can take, any step that the capitalist death cult can take to dehumanize, to remove the human empathy and compassion from the conversation, to pretend as though policing should and can be done by robots and by automated forces, which will obviously be programmed to be racist. Like, it's very difficult for me to believe that these sorts of things won't hit the streets. And of course, like, kids will fuck with these things. That's going to be the best part. The best part is going to be to see the videos of these things when they come back from walking the streets, and to see the graffiti and the shit that's been done to them. Like, because fuck these things. Any society that deploys these things for security measures is no longer a society that needs to be obeyed or followed. Period. Full stop. I'm happy to say that. Like, I'm happy to say that. If I lived in a city that was deploying these in police services, I know I live in a lawless community and I don't need to follow any of its rules. Period. Like, I'm not going to be ruled by a robot. I'm not going to be policed by a robot. I'm not going to give my papers over to a robot. Some fucking bullshit automated system. Like, that's not what's going to happen. And if the mayor of my city started to deploy these, just be like, okay, so there's no rules, there's no laws. We don't need to abide by any of this. All there is power and terror. That's all there is, right? Because that's what these things are. Like, these things have no concept of justice. They have no concept of what is right or what is wrong. They literally are just programmed to enact the will of their owners. They're literally a robot. And guess what? The will of the owners is going to be suppression and oppression, like, very clearly. Like, what else could these things do? Like, these robots don't have judgment, right? They just have scripting. They don't have, like, ideas or any of this kind of stuff. They just are like they're fucking machines. Like, no. Like, no. Just because you can make them look like they have the ability to discern between right and wrong doesn't mean that they are, or doesn't mean that they have. I watched iRobot last night. They won't be rude. They'll have cutesy woo-woo voices. Please show your ID. I think you're right. That, like, they'll put, like, a teddy bear on this thing, right? They'll make it look as cute as they possibly can if they can. If that's what it'll take. Yep, there was some of these exact robots on display at the most recent arms dealer convention. Yeah. Well, I mean, fucking take a look at, like, Iron Man, right? Like, Iron Man, in my opinion, is one of the most like, Tony Stark is one of the most despicable figures in modern media. Like, we're supposed to worship this guy because he's what? A fucking arms dealer. That's who he is, right? He never comes around on that. There's never a moment where he goes, like, maybe we shouldn't sell arms to other countries. Like, that kind of thing. That doesn't exist, right? The growth that exists for Tony Stark is that instead of selling the weapons, he becomes the weapon, right? And that's cool. Like, oh, super cool that, like, a mercenary private owner of a arms company gets to just be the fucking leader of what the fuck are you even talking about? And the idea that Tony Stark isn't actually in jail, like, immediately, like, the idea that the end of Iron Man 1, where he's like, I am Iron Man, wasn't like, oh, you're under arrest. Like, obviously, we should arrest this guy and put him in jail. Like, it's extremely straightforward. It's just another method to get us used to being ruled by sociopaths, right? That we're supposed to be in love with, like the modern iteration of Sherlock Holmes is outright, he's a high-functioning sociopath. Sheldon from Big Bang Theory is a high-functioning sociopath. Like, we are being trained as a people to get used to the idea that sociopaths are good and are a net benefit to the society, when no, they're not. Like, no, they're fucking not. They're doing everything they can to manipulate the circumstances and destroy things. That's what they're here for. Yeah, someone hasn't seen The Matrix. Wait until the biological police realize they're no longer to use of the bourgeoisie's state. What happens then? I mean, then they'll recognize that they've always been on the wrong side of things, right? Like, once they're disposable. And of course the great fear is like, okay, so a billionaire, and he has got a fleet of these things, right? Like, if there's a billionaire that has, how many of these things until it's like a major military force, right? 100? Like, if a billionaire had 1,000 of these things, right? Like, we would consider that a fucking problem, wouldn't we? Like, are you telling me that Elon Musk and Bezos and these guys don't already have fleets of these? Absolutely. And literally, like let's go crazy, right? Like, if I'm a billionaire and people are saying, well, we don't quite have the tracking right, we don't quite have that, you know, it's not quite gonna be good enough or accurate, the technology's not there yet. Well, we know this thing can run forward, we know it can find a target, strap a bomb to it. That's it. You're a billionaire, what do you care? Strap a bomb to it, have it go to a place and blow it up, right? Like, these things are the perfect suicide bombers. They can go into a spot and just blow themselves up, and there's and if you shoot at it, so what? Like, this is a terrifying addition to the military, and the idea that it's being presented to a stadium full of people while they're like cheerleaders dancing and all this kind of stuff really just reinforces what I've been saying about North American culture, which is that we're bloodthirsty barbarians. We take a look at a piece of military-grade weapons technology, that's what this is, and we go, it's so cute. Look how cute it is. Yeah, normal. Cool and normal. What the fuck? Like, no, dude, no. Like, if the species ever evolves, which big question marks about whether or not we actually will, but we will come to an understanding that even the building of these weapons is a crime, right? That like building a nuclear bomb is by itself a crime. That simply having one of these robots will be seen as a crime. That like no, you don't get weapons grade military technology for what? To do what with? Like, what do you think people are going to do with this stuff? Yeah, and he created the AI that turned against them. Elon Musk vibes. Yeah. Hey, comrades. Oh, hey, those robot things left transhumanists like me were trying to get people to start a public conversation on since 20 years ago. Yeah. The flying ones can have all the explosive charges and be equipped with facial recognition. One could relatively cheap fill an area with 100 of them to set. Yeah. I agree. I've been saying that U.S. culture is absolutely geared to convince people that sociopathy is a virtue and your conscience is a liability. It's horrible. We'll take a look at what they're doing with all the like reformist stuff in villains, right? Like you've got like Joker, which I actually think was a really good one, but like stuff like Cruella de Vil or Maleficent or any of this, where they're just like retconning the story so that we're supposed to like look at a literal like Cruella de Vil literally kills and skins puppies for jackets. The story of 101 Dalmatians is the story of a crazed mad woman who, with her two henchmen, attempts to capture puppies so that she can murder them and skin them. And Disney is like, yeah, we should retell this story but make people fall in love with Cruella. Yeah, Cruella, you know, her name being Cruella should be a sympathetic figure who we all go, oh yeah, Cruella, right? Like this revisionism and this reformism that is happening in the culture in regards to like our villains, like it is a way to get us used to the idea that someone like George W. Bush, right? Like George W. Bush is currently being rehabilitated. Like he's doing press tours. He's going around and giving speeches in public and he's not being arrested. The worst that he gets is somebody in the audience standing up and yelling at him. And then they take that guy and they get him out of the hall. Right? So that's like a minor thing for a guy that should be hung, right? We should charge him for treason and war crimes. He should go to the Hague. Right? He should be tried the way that Hitler, not Hitler, because Hitler took the coward's way out, but we should try him as the Nazis were tried, right? He should face the consequences of these overt and obvious war crimes that he is 100% guilty of. Instead of that, he gets carted around the nation, right? Well, you know, when I was in office, you know, it's tough being a president. You know, it's tough being a president. You know, I've been doing some painting. Anybody want to see my paintings? Like, and we're all supposed to be like, oh, you know, George, he's learning a lot. He's painting, finding a way to funnel all of that and all. Like, what the fuck? Like, what the absolute fuck? A man like George W. Bush should not be allowed to go out in public. Like, he should not be allowed to go out in public. That man should be arrested. He should have been arrested 10 years ago. He should have been arrested while he was in office. Right? He should be sent to the Hague. He should be put on trial. And when they execute him, we should televise it. Like, this is what happens to war criminals. When you kill 1 million people, guess what happens to you? Yeah, we already have drones with thermal vision, right? Well, and we know skinning puppies is real girl boss energy, I guess. You ladies got to get on board. Exactly. Skinning puppies is where it's at. And we know that the drone program has been a complete failure. Like, there was a whistleblower not that long ago who actually is in the middle of doing jail time because he blew the whistle on the drone program, saying that 90% of the time the drones miss their target, right? And don't miss their target by hitting like nothing. They miss their target by killing innocent civilians. So 90% of the time the drone program fails in its objective. And so they don't, like, take these little guys here, if these little guys run into the thing and blow themselves up and kill a bunch of civilians and miss the target, they don't care. Like, they don't care. The point is not to kill, like, a strategic target. The point is to spread terror. That's the point. The United States is the largest terrorist organization on the planet, and its goal is to maintain and establish its rule through terrorism. That's what it does. And it has a very effective propaganda machine. Like, how how wonderful it was for the terrorist organization of the United States to convince anyone, including its own citizens, that it was interested in fighting against terrorism, right? That, oh, we're going to launch a war on terror, right? We can't be the terrorists. We are the ones fighting terrorism. It's like, no, like they are obviously a terrorist organization that obviously exists in order to spread terror and maintain their rule through acts of shock and awe, force, and terror. That's what the United States military is. That's what the CIA is. That's what the United States State Department is. Like, we have a major problem on the world stage right now. There is a large Nazi-style force operating in the world, walking around, trying to exert its dominance on the world stage while pretending that it's interested in things like democracy or any of that kind of stuff. All right, guys, I got a snorting pug here that I got to take care of. So, let's watch a video full of zombies and lost souls. The sad reality and devastation fentanyl has caused in many American cities. Okay, buddy. I got you. That was a tough one, man. Come on. Swallow. Big swallow. Big swallows. 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 Did you do it? That's a big swallow now. Did you do it? You're such a good little boy. You're such a good little boy. Aren't you just the coolest little boy? Okay, buddy. You gotta go serious this time. Here, let me refresh. Congratulations to poverty for winning the war on poverty, drugs for winning the war on drugs, and terror for winning the war on terror. Yep. As you can see, right, the fentanyl crisis. Did you see Tulsi Gabbard on Tucker recently defending the drone program after U.S. killed an innocent family in Afghanistan? She's awful. I've definitely turned the corner on Tulsi. That when she first came to prominence, I was supportive of her, and I didn't mind that people were supporting her because her position was that these wars were a failure. But as I began to sort of see more about Tulsi Gabbard, it became obvious that she still was very much an imperialist, still was very much a warmonger, that her position wasn't that the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and the subsequent spread of that war wasn't a moral abomination, which is what it is. Like, it is a moral abomination, what they did, but simply a strategic blunder, right? That this has become the way that people have begun talking about that war of aggression in the Middle East, as they've talked about it as a strategic blunder, when the truth is that it's morally evil what they've done. And yeah, as Tulsi has sort of moved forward, right, it's because she is finding what happens to people. Like, and this is something, I think this is like a truism, that when people begin to create a base of support, right? Speaking of bases of support, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Maybe send $1 my way through the Patreon down below, right? I would appreciate it. But once people get a base of support, they begin to say things to the base that they know the base wants to hear, and they begin sending things into the world specifically because it's coming out from the base, not because it's the truth, right? That's something that I am going to be working very hard for myself to always fight against. I know it's going to lead to conflict between myself and people in my chat, regulars in the chat too. So it's hopefully something that we can all work through together and all of that. But I will always tell what I consider to be the truth. And I'm never going to do anything but that. I hope. Whereas I think that people like Tulsi Gabbard, I see this is very common in YouTube, like celebrity types, right? Like someone like Tim Dillon. Tim Dillon is actually upfront about this. Like, he's actually honest about this. That he will just say whatever the people who are paying him to say want, right? That if I had if someone was donating $1,000 to me, and they said, okay, but that means that you need to take this position, I would say, well, no, thank you. But there are people in the discourse that would be like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll just take this position on this, that's fine, and spread that around, that's fine. And I think that that's actually quite common. And I think it happens almost, like, I don't think it's specifically stated or thought this way, but I think it just kind of happens that way, where people gravitate in that direction, right? Like, people don't want to risk... yet another reason why the capitalist model is a failure. People don't want to risk losing financial support. So they're going to say whatever they think needs to be said in order to garner financial support from people, right? And they're not going to tell the truth. God, I've spent a lot of time as Smooth Brain who loved a lot of people that I clearly see are just grifters. Well, and I mean... don't get beat up about that, dude. Like, I mean, first of all, we're all kids once. Like, we're all learning, we're all figuring stuff out, and many of the grifters probably don't consider themselves grifters, right? Like, that's another part of it. So someone I think I can think of, like, really clearly, who does not see himself as a grifter, even though he kind of is someone like Sam Harris, right? Like, Sam Harris has a PhD in neuroscience, right? I think he considers himself to be well-educated and well-read and well-understood, like all of that kind of stuff. And in many ways, I think his arguments are often well-meant. Like, he genuinely is trying to figure out or understand what's happening. He's just an extreme racist and a bigot and doesn't understand that about himself, right? That, like... some of the things that he has written about Muslims and Islam are on the same level as, like, blackface minstreling and, like, the apologencia for genocide of the First Nations people. Like, the stuff that he's written on Islam is some of the most bigoted shit I've ever seen. And he wouldn't be saying that, and he wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't a good amount of support for it, right? If his followers weren't going along with it, he wouldn't say it. You know, and so it flows in pretty naturally to his overall sort of thesis and his overall sort of stuff, right? So people seem to kind of sidestep it, and there have been figures who have directly confronted him about it, but he doesn't take that very seriously because he doesn't actually acknowledge that he is, like, at base a bigot, right? And so as the society has moved on. And, like, his pro-torture apologetics, like, I mean, that kind of stuff, like, that was one moment where he outright moved on from the subject. He doesn't even talk about that anymore, although he's never recanted, right? And so, but he doesn't see himself as a grifter, even though, like, he pretty much is just trying to sell books, right? He's just trying to sell books, and if he thinks he can write something that people will buy, he'll write it. He's not really that interested in the truth. Like, his email exchange, rather, with Noam Chomsky. So Sam Harris has an email exchange with Noam Chomsky, where Noam Chomsky basically schools him. Like, it's a total schooling. And Harris releases the email exchange. He asks Noam Chomsky if he can, and Noam Chomsky says, okay, I think it's weird that you want to, but okay. And the only reason for Harris to have done this is to sort of raise his own prestige and profile. Oh, look, I had a conversation with Noam Chomsky, right? But like it was a complete and total schooling. But he knows that most people are not actually going to read it. Like most people are not actually going to read that the exchange that happened between the two of them. And out of touch, but I also think he's just an Islamophobe, right? He's just terrified of Muslims. I think he's terrified of Islam. His depiction of Islam is cartoonish. If I wanted to be generous to him, I would call it cartoonish. But it's extremely racist, and I just think that he can't get over 9/11, right? He can't get over 9/11, and he can't get over the fact that his own government and his own nation has turned into a barbarian terrorist state, right? Like he is a defender of like the state religion, like that's really what Sam Harris exists to do. He exists to defend the state, and he does so. And if he can do that by cartoonishly demonizing Muslim people, he will. Yeah, I fell in love with the whole IW crowd around it. IDW. Why do I feel like I should know what that is? What I will say is that even though he's a bigot, he seems to actually believe it. Yes, that's just it. Several of the other IDW people he fell in with for a while. Oh, is that the internet dark web? Is that who that is? Well, he initially, even before the IDW stuff, he was with what were called the New Atheists, right? That was Harris, Hitchens, Dawkins, and Dennett, I believe, was part of that as well. And the it's always seemed to me since Bush is that Islam was the placeholder for non-white. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. Like, it's a white supremacist culture, right? And 9/11 broke Hitchens too. Yeah, 9/11 was a big problem for a lot of these. Like, and it's such a shame because these guys were doing good work going after the evangelicals. Like, you can critique them for their own lack of religious knowledge, but like my big critique for the New Atheist movement was that they ceded intellectual and moral authority to the hypocrites, right? That like, well, yeah, of course grifters, liars, and hypocrites are going to take these texts and distort them for their own meaning, but the New Atheists really ceded those documents and ceded that territory. And honestly, if they had have just like read any of it, that they would see pretty clearly that like, oh yeah, like what is being said in this book is not what's being said by these guys. So these guys are frauds, right? And then what that would mean is when they turned around and actually talked to people who are even attempting to follow, like, to me, the New Atheist movement actually died when Dawkins had a conversation with the then Archbishop of Canterbury for the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church, the Archbishop of Canterbury, I believe his name is Rowan Atkinson, had a debate with Dawkins. And it wasn't really much of a debate, honestly. It was more of a conversation, which was nice. But to me, it really was the end of the New Atheist movement, because it was the moment where it became clear that if they're not talking to crazed evangelicals, that if they're, or fundamentalists generally, that if they're just talking to someone who has read the texts and is well read and understands what it's about, that they don't really know what to say, right? They don't really understand how to have these conversations and get into the weeds about what the purpose of these religious pursuits are and what the purpose of this sort of existential pursuit is in the first place. And the conversation, like, it's rife with misunderstandings, and it's rife with semantic debate, right? There's a lot of that goes on that the New Atheists they're not equipped to handle. Like, they're not there to handle. And in a way, they become fundamentalists themselves, right? That it becomes difficult to, it becomes impossible to actually have a conversation about compassion or empathy or any of this kind of stuff because they're not actually that interested in that conversation. They're more interested in semantic debate. Yet the worst trait of Islam is its tendency to appear over oil fields and geostrategic military locations. Yeah, why do they keep doing that? Why do they keep settling communities on top of resources that we own? Right? Yeah, that's the problem with Islam, you know? Like, there's all these resources that we own, obviously, because we say we do. And they just keep building settlements on there for thousands of years. So let's just go in there and deal with those, but we'll get those resources because they belong to us, clearly. I felt like I was super late getting into the new atheist thing. I didn't lose my Mormon beliefs until 2017, and that's when I discovered all of that. Oh, yes. Yeah. What's interesting about the Mormons, I have Mormons in my family, and they're all great people. Like, that's the thing that's crazy about them. And South Park really hit on it. Like, if you've seen the South Park Mormonism episode, like, South Park does a lot of work making fun of religion and making fun of a lot of establishment, all this kind of stuff. And then when they went after Mormonism, they were skewering. Like, they went right after it, down to the foundational doctrines and the foundational beliefs. But they gave the Mormons themselves the final say in the episode. And the Mormons basically said that the final statement was... hey, fuck you, I've got a good thing going here. Like, we've got good people, we're all a community, we love one another, right? Go fuck yourself. And that was basically it. And it's like, oh yeah, like, good point, you know? That, like, sure, you can go back and you can think about, what is his name, Joseph, whoever that guy was with the golden tablets and how fucking stupid all of that was. But at the end of the day, like, the Mormons seem fine. Like, they don't seem to be the worst outcropping of any kind of crazy shit that we've seen here in North America, right? Although, what's his name? There's a Republican Mormon, Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's a Mormon, and he's kind of nutty, right? Well, I mean, fucking, they're all a little kooky, if you ask me. Well, not kooky's not the word to use. Like, here's the meme, by the way. Here's the meme. The church of today is not the same as it was 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah, and that's actually good. Like, that's actually good. A church that refuses to reform itself or refuse to... oh, you're saying it's gone in the other direction. Used to be... Mormon church, to be clear... Oh, I see what you're saying. Never mind. The, like, Augustus said this outright. That when religious dogma is confronted with evidence... If you double down on the dogma, then you discredit the organization, right? That it is better to reform and change the dogma than it is to confront evidence and not move forward with the evidence. And like, that was like in the 10th century, for God's sakes. So like religious organizations and religious people have known this for a long time. They're just choosing. Yeah, not in a good way. Yeah, well, I mean, you take a look at what's going on with the evangelicals, right? The evangelical churches are nuts. Like, they're outright crazed. A lot of the, like, war rhetoric and a lot of the shit that we're seeing in the Middle East and all of this is people who believe that they are launching a righteous crusade. I mean, George W. Bush outright called it a righteous crusade. Like, the madness that comes with this sort of belief in wizardry and magic, as if these things are real, you know? And it's such a shame that humans seem so susceptible to that kind of thinking, this kind of wizardry or magical thinking, because these texts are actually quite brilliant, right? Like, the Bible is a brilliant document. Like, I wish that we continuously were building upon it. Like, the Gnostic Gospels should be part of the Bible, right? Like, and the writings of Aquinas and the writings of Augustus and the writings of all these guys. Like, they should be part of the Bible, but that they were purposefully excluded, because in like the 3rd century, Christianity ceased being a spiritual movement and became a political movement, And once it became a political movement, then everything just kind of calcifies, and it becomes impossible to actually reform. I love this meme. Pandora Papers on the one side, literally no mics. Facebook on the other side, surrounded by mics. The conspiracy theorists online are saying that the Facebook outage was timed very coincidentally with the Pandora Papers, and that these two events seem to be too coincidental to be a coincidence. Bookworm Skates, good to see you, bud. The roots of Mormonism are racism and nationalism. Yeah. Any Mormon over 50 was taught that black people are inferior while growing up. Yeah. I think that's definitely the truth. But that to me isn't exclusive to Mormonism. I think that's the reason why I don't stand up and ring a bell about it, because I think that racism and nationalism, while it existed certainly within Mormonism, it was ubiquitous across the board in American culture. So to me, it's like the Mormons were just caught up in what was ubiquitous throughout the entire culture, right? That there's a history of black people being considered inferior in America, right? That in many ways, America itself is founded on racism and nationalism, right? So it's hardly surprising that organizations like the Mormon Church would also get caught up in that kind of fervor. I don't think I believe this conspiracy, by the way. I want that to be said completely. I think conspiracies are fun and they're fun to deal with, but like, I think the Pandora Papers coming out and then suddenly Facebook gets shut down, like, I think that those two events are not connected in any meaningful way. That I think Facebook did shut down in order to delete some documents. I think that they are going into I think that they are going to have an FBI investigation done on them. I think that there are high-level power players that are going to get into Zuckerberg's shit. And so I think they shut down Facebook in order to delete some files that would indict them, right? Like, as big, giant multinational corporations do. And within the same time that that's happening, the Pandora Papers get released. And, yeah, and I mean, like, the Pandora Papers is like, to say it's causing a stir would be to do too much credit. That's exactly what a CIA shill trying to hide a conspiracy would say. They're on to me. They're on to me. Loaf. How dare you, sir, accuse me of being a CIA shill? I think that's the worst thing that you can accuse a man of being. How dare you? How dare you? I don't know, though. Good to stay sharp. Good to stay sharp. It is a doozy of a coincidence, but the rich are untouchable. They're not worried about the news. Well, and like the general opinion in the populace with the release of the Pandora Papers is like, yeah, we know. Like, that's exactly how people are taking it. They're just like, it's yet another like stone in the bucket, yet another piece of evidence that we can all point to. And it just seems as though the Pandora Paper news got released and everybody just went, okay, moving on. Like, everybody knows that it's not going to galvanize people to get into the streets. Like, everybody knows. If that were the case, then the Panama Papers would have done it, right? Like, the Pandora Papers is just like the sequel, you know? And if the first one didn't do it, the second one's not going to do it. Like, at this stage in the game, I do really start to ask the question of what it is going to take. Like, what do you guys think it is going to take? Like, in the case of, like, George Floyd, right? Because George Floyd was a big protest movement, right? Big riots happened in the United States over it. It literally took a police officer not only executing a man publicly, but doing it in this, like, really gruesome way where it's, like, kneeling on his head while other police officers stood around and watched him do it, right? Like, it's going to be Oh, worse is being accused of being a liberal. But you got me there, love. That's the truth, isn't it? That's the truth. Well, because a liberal is a person who's like, oh, we should listen to what the CIA has to say. Oh, look, CIA has things to say. We should take that seriously. Yeah, okay. Okay. Now, boys, don't fight. Don't fight. Like, is someone like Joe Biden literally going to have to, like, are we going to have to catch on video the president of the United States having sex with a little girl? Like, do you think that that's actually going to be the thing? Where, like, like, let's say Donald Trump is in power again, and he goes to, like, the new Jeffrey Epstein Island or whatever, and we catch footage of him having sex with, like, a 13-year-old or whatever, the way he does. Like, do you think that might do it? Like what is it going to be that is actually going to get people to finally recognize that their entire culture is irredeemable? Don't fight. Them's fighting words. Indeed. So, wanted to point this out, right? Social inequality and hyperviolence. Why the bleak world of Netflix Squid Game is a streaming phenomenon. Again, I'm not going to read this, but it's... I want to encourage everybody to seek out and watch the Squid Game, because it does capture the insanity and the manic nature of wealth accumulation. That to me, the fundamental moral of the story is not only that accumulating large scale wealth drives people mad and turns them into sociopaths, but also that we won't have any justice for it. That the wealthy will do what they want to do and there won't be any justice. Outside of some sort of, like, very ephemeral kind of dislocated sort of idea. And it's a very straightforward story, very well told. I highly recommend Netflix Squid Game. Warning, violence. Oh, I know, Milo. I know. My little dog's looking at me. He's got a ball. Well, where's your ball? Bring your ball over. Bring your ball. Where's your ball? Don't be so stupid. I know, you're very dumb. Because you're little. He's got a little brain. It's about this big. He does very silly things. Alleviating poverty must be a key strategy in addressing mental health. Nice to see that there is a columnist out in the world who is actually admitting what is obviously true, right? Like, do you think plunging people into desperation, do you think keeping people homeless on the streets, do you think food insecurity and housing insecurity would have a connection with mental health issues? Yeah, I think so. Like, I think so. That we're not, but we're not actually having this conversation on the national stage. Like, you'll notice. I do think, like, a big reason why in this last Canadian election there wasn't really any movement anywhere is because, like, people know. People understand that the society needs to be reconfigured so that the people at the very bottom of it are taken care of. And if you're not actually going to do that, if you're not actually going to attempt to take care of the people on the very bottom, then it's like we don't want to participate. It's like we're not interested. And so there is no national conversation. Like, the best we have in regards to mental health issues is, like, the conservatives were saying, we'll set up a mental health hotline, right? So you can call someone. Like, shut up. Like, who cares about that? How about how about eliminating systemic poverty? Like, how about just eliminating, like, just goodbye to systemic poverty? It doesn't exist. It's not possible. Like, this is sort of the asinine nature of this. Like, imagine you were playing a game, and the game was designed in such a way so that a certain segment of the players would just fall out the bottom of it all the time, right? Like, and that you were constantly needing to, like, upkeep their survival in order to keep them going like we would want to reform this. We would want to reform this game. We would want to have a better game. But for some reason, when it comes to life, oh no, those people, they deserve it, right? Every successful socialist revolution acknowledged the reality that the system we have cannot establish justice and took appropriate action to achieve it themselves. Absolutely. Yeah, will a mental health hotline get your car out of impound? Pay for your past due rent? Yeah, buy you food, right? Make sure you have electricity, heat, you know? Like, and it does seem as though we've gotten to the point where we're not willing to completely impoverish families who have children, right? The child care benefit here in Canada, and even in the United States, they've done something like this, is a tacit admission that we can eliminate poverty. We know how to. We know it's effective. We know it's successful. We know it works, right? The child care benefit has been a resoundingly successful project here in Canada, like massively successful. It's halved the amount of child poverty that exists in the country. So it works, and we know it works, and we know it can be upkept by government. We know that it can be done. Like it's not that difficult to do even. And we could easily extend this policy to all citizens and eliminate poverty that way. Don't you think that poverty is necessary to threaten the working class and negotiate lower wages? Of course. No, of course. Like this is the number one reason why they won't do it. Like the number one reason why they won't do it is because they're sociopaths, right? Because and not only like this has become my newest thing. I'm no longer interested in speculation, right? Because we don't need to speculate, right? We can listen to what these guys say out loud and how they talk out loud, right? It's not a secret. The idea that we are going to destroy working conditions for the working class and make things really bad for them has been stated out loud, right? We don't need to speculate. We don't need to like imagine a conspiracy in a back room or anything. They say this shit out loud in official documents, like to Congress. They say this shit. And we don't need and like this is to me the major failing of the media. That like if all the media would have to do is be like, this guy said this. Like literally. They would just have to be like, here's the clip of this guy saying this thing. And like gone with the speculation, gone with the commentary, gone with all this. And that's really coming from like there's a lot of people who will do a lot of weird speculation in regards to China, right? Where they'll be like, oh, there must be a genocide because there's this document saying that they need to be careful in regards to Uyghurs and all this kind of stuff. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So when the Canadians they'll compare what's going on with the Uyghurs with what's going on, what happened to the residential school system. So when the residential school system was erected, they were explicit. Like there was no speculation, there was no like secretive cabal behind the scenes. There was nothing like that. There were people standing in the parliament saying outright that the objective of the residential school system is to, quote, kill the Indian. That it is the final solution to the Indian problem, right? And so the idea that like, oh, well, we can build a speculative kind of thing based on this sort of stuff as if it's like a conspiracy theory, you don't need to. Like when Adolf Hitler ascended to power, he did so holding a book that he wrote where he said we should round up the Jews and eradicate them. It wasn't a secret. Like it wasn't a secret. It wasn't like a surprise. It wasn't like surprise Holocaust. Like everybody knew. Everyone was well aware of what Adolf Hitler's plan was, right? The people who were supporting him were well aware of what his plan was and what he intended to do, right? So we don't need to speculate, I guess is where I'm coming down. And that you can always find people explicitly stating this shit. And if you can't find somebody explicitly stating it, then it probably isn't real. It probably doesn't exist, right? Which is like the number one thing that I've got against this Uyghur genocide narrative. Because it's like, find me the documentation that shows them actually talking about this. like the Canadians did, like the Americans did, like the Europeans did, like the Germans did, like every single time that a genocide happens, they do. They explicitly state that the intention is to create a genocide in the region, like the Israelis have, right? Like, you're just not seeing it because it doesn't exist. It's not there. And so, like, we don't need to, like, it's so easy to get caught up in suspicion, but we don't need to be caught up in suspicion. Like, what I talk about isn't me being caught up in suspicion. It's and creating a conspiracy theory. It's me literally just believing what they say. Like, when the State Department releases its plan to invade China, I believe them. Like, that's it. They will never give up their efforts to keep us desperate so we can serve them. We need leadership that will take back the wealth and give it back to the people. The only things that keep the oligarchs in power and influence is their outrageous wealth. Yeah. And at this stage in the game, the system is so corrupt that it can't reform itself. Like, it literally cannot. It's incapable of doing that. So all that's left is to surround the halls of power. Like, that's it. There is no alternative solution at this point. And you can see that the system in the United States is doing everything it can to keep the right wing and the left wing separate from one another on this issue. Because, like, you've got the right wing. The right wing is obviously very politically motivated, right? The January 6th insurrection showed that that was the case. They're very politically motivated. They want to surround the halls of power, and in fact, they want to go into the halls of power and cause problems, right? Like, that's what they want to do. Well, if you, as a leftist, could convince these guys, hey, show up, but instead of actually going in and using violence and destroying the place, just stand outside with us, right? Just stand outside with us. How long? As long as it takes. Like, as long as it takes. There's no crime against surrounding the White House. The crime was when they went in and started to, like, try to kidnap and shoot people. Like, there were shots fired. They killed a police officer, right? And these right-wing types don't quite understand that if you start using violence in your protest movements, the state knows how to talk that way. Like, the state knows what the conversation of violence looks like. That's why they use, like, agent provocateurs and things like this in order to foment discontent within protest movements and turn them into violent movements, because they don't know what to do about peaceful protest. They literally don't know. There have been theories written about it. There have been powerful people who have written extensively on the subject of what to be done in the face of peaceful protest, and they don't know what to do. That's why peaceful protest works, because they don't know how to respond to it. They don't know what to do, and eventually they have to capitulate, because the society starts to actually build itself, right? That, like, if there is, like, 100,000 people essentially living in a space and staying in a space, that starts to build a society, right? That's what happened with the Occupy movement. They started to build a society, right? And you can't have that, because that's a society that operates outside of the control of the system that they're protesting. And so you either capitulate to their demands in the hopes that they will include you in their new society that they've already built, or the new society will just overwhelm you. And we've seen it. We've seen the new society overwhelm people before. Like, we've seen that happen, and we've seen the capitulation angle. Like, Nixon capitulated, right? FDR capitulated. Those were capitulations, and the mistake that those protest movements made is that they didn't demand the removal of the capitalist system. That the removal of capitalism itself wasn't on the docket. And it definitely should have been. All right, guys, I'm going to pause for just a minute. I've got a little pug here. He really is, like, angling for some peanut butter. He's going a little crazy about it. Do I have another video? Nope. So, chair stream. Chair stream. Okay, buddy. Okay. We're going to put on a little show for everybody. Because you don't really know how cute you are, but you're really cute. Pug with the chair stream. It's a chair stream for us all. I hope you guys don't mind that I take a little break while I give my pug some peanut butter. He loves the peanut butter. He loves the peanut butter. Okay, buddy, come, sit. High five. Good boy. Come here. Here's a good boy. Give you guys a little show. Or in the case of American-sponsored regime change in the past 170 plus years, just provide funding for a coup in a country that moves beyond capitalism. Yeah. Like, you see that all throughout South America, right? Like, there are tons of examples in South America where the American empire goes and just foments a coup in the region. And in some cases, I think they are trying to foment a coup in order to take it over and do something. But I also think it's in some cases they're just interested in the disruption, you know? That, like, the disrupting an area is good enough. Like, that's essentially their plan with China. Like, their stated plan with China is just disruption. It isn't to, like, go in and seize territory and, like, take China over and turn it into a vassal state or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, clearly they want to do that, but their stated plans right now are just let's disrupt what they're doing, right? If we can set them back, then we can catch up. From Robert Reich here, 98.68% of IATSE members just voted to authorize a nationwide strike for fair pay, adequate rest, and breaks. This could be the biggest private sector strike in the U.S. in 10 plus years and the first in the industry's 128-year history. A milestone movement for the labor movement. A milestone moment, rather, for the labor movement. This, to me, is actually where shit gets real. Like, it's one thing when it's, you know, a disenfranchised worker like myself, someone who's been isolated and has been separated from any kind of movement, getting on YouTube and saying, like, we need to actually, like, revolt and all of this. Like, a strike on this scale, these sorts of strikes get lots of shit done. They get shit done. And to me, it is only a matter of time that as the unions and labor movements that exist in the United States begin to understand that their system has abandoned them, right? And it has. Like, the American system no longer functions on behalf of the populace, period, full stop. Like, it's designed not to. That what it's going to take is it's going to take not independent strikes, but a full-scale general strike across the board. And they're starting to put this together. And there's becoming massive there's become massive unrest in unions and organizations because the unions keep trying to kick the can down the road or keep trying to avoid a conflict. And you've got a lot of younger membership now coming into these unions and recognizing that, like, oh, things are pretty calcified here. Like, we could do some shit. We could do some damage. Commie economist, I love your name, bud. Economist. Economist. Hey, yeah. Yeah, that's nice. I like seeing workers have confidence in a strike like this. It makes sense. Give the reasonable conditions they're asking you from very profitable businesses. Yeah. Like, to me, we really are, as a people, we are just, like, begging for scraps at this point. Like, that's my biggest critique about all of these movements. I think about, like, the Fight for 15 movement. Like, the Fight for 15 movement was begging for scraps. And all of the gains that were made from the Fight for 15 movement have already been obliterated. Like, it's like, who gives a shit if you have $15 when inflation is eating away all those gains, right? Like, it's and we're seeing it throughout the United States right now, where people are just refusing to participate in the labor market at all. And it's getting blamed on all kinds of things except the fucking wage, right? Like, your wage is $7.25. Like, get the fuck out of here. But also, like, who wants to be a service worker in a society filled with petulant babies, right? Like, I don't care to serve these kind of narcissistic nightmare people, right? The Karens of the society. Like, why are we doing that? Like, why are we selling ourselves to the absolute worst people that exist in the society? Like, forget that, right? I'm not like, how much would you have to pay me to do that? And then you start to layer things onto it. Like, not only are the jobs we're working for these nightmare people who are complete narcissists in the first place, but then you start to realize that most of the jobs you're doing are perpetuating a climate change catastrophe that is absolutely going to destroy our way of life. Like, hard to convince me to participate in this. Right? Hard to convince me to participate in this. I find and I find it a touch odd that people are still participating in it. Like, it's like you're in a rowboat and you're rowing merrily down the stream, and everyone around you is screaming, "Hey, there's a waterfall coming," and you're just whistling while rowing. Like, nah, pull that shit over. Stop rowing down the stream. Like, it's weird to me that the people who live in slogan land, just get a job, like these sorts of slogans, can't seem to understand the slogan, just stop. Like, just fucking stop. Like, nothing we're doing has any validity anymore. And I think that's really the thing that I think people are not quite willing to capitulate on. That I'm a little bit ahead of the society on this, which is that there is no redeemable aspect to the society. None of our work is manifesting into anything beneficial. None of the institutions are operating for the benefit of the populace. Nothing is actually working for its intended purpose. And everything we are doing is only facilitating our own deaths. Without exception. Without exception. There's not one and I always challenge the chat with this. Can you think of an institution? Can you think of something that's actually working in the society for the benefit of the populace? Like, literally anything. I'll take anything at this point. So, of course, as expected, right, this is from Workers Today, CIA plot to kidnap, kill Julian Assange, right? The largest terrorist organization that exists in the society, the CIA, plotted, big surprise, to kidnap and kill Julian Assange, right? This is what happens to journalists in America, which is the reason why I have a YouTube channel that is growing, period, right? Like, if I was just some crank kind of talking way out in left field the way that I do, and the society was not doing stuff like this, I probably wouldn't grow as a channel. I'd probably just be like a dude, right? Speaking my mind, all that kind of stuff, like working a job just like the rest of us. But the reality is that our system is so collapsed and is so bereft of any credibility whatsoever, is that the lane is wide open for a guy like me to just sit here and tell the truth about what's actually happening in the world. Like, yeah, Julian now, whoever released the Pandora Papers next, like they did to the guy that released the Panama Papers, right? They murdered those people. Like, those people died. So the Pandora Papers, like, we'll see some people get murdered over that for sure. Because that's how they do, right? That's how they do. Like, it is starting to get to the point where they might as well just admit it, right? They might as well just say out loud to everybody, like, yeah, the Pandora Papers were released. These were the people who were responsible for it. They die for it, right? And that's nothing new, right? If you're a whistleblower, you go to jail, you get killed, right? Like the idea that there's some kind of system in America to protect whistleblowers, or at least to like indict them legally, like what a joke that is. Like that's a total farce, if you ask me. Like there's no legal system in America. Like it's just the entire American system is built on fear. It's just who is scared of who in the moment, right? That if the politicians are scared of the populace, then the populace get things, and if the populace is scared of the politicians, then the politicians get things. That's how the system works. I mean, works, but like, it's completely based on fear. And a good way to foment fear, and a good way to tell the populace, hey, don't reveal our war crimes, don't reveal the shitty things that we're doing, is to kill the people that do, right? I'm very curious to know why they just didn't, right? Pompeo and other top agency leaders were completely detached from reality because they were so embarrassed about Vault 7. They were seeing blood. Yeah. I just don't understand why they just don't do it, you know? Like, this is the thing that's got me about Julian Assange. Like, I've always thought this about Julian Assange, that why don't they just kill him? Like, since when have they ever cared about, like, oh, he's in an embassy, so? Like, why would they ever care about that? Like, that's the one thing that I've got that I kind of ask about. Yeah, there were discussions on whether killing Assange was possible or whether it was legal. Like, I find it a little odd that these guys are actually even having these discussions, as if they care about the law or care about any of that stuff in the first place. Like, it blows my mind that, like, why not just send a guy over there and just, like, in front of everybody? Who gives a fuck? Like, what are they going to do? No, I'm with the CIA. Clean this up. Leave. Like, I really do think, like, even within the halls of power, there's still, like, this idea that there is, like, decorum. Like, this was the thing that Donald Trump really kind of broke apart for lots of people. And a lot of people which was that Donald Trump broke apart a lot of the decorum, right? That there was sort of unspoken decorum, or, like, not written down, but, like, gentlemen's agreements on how things should proceed. And Donald Trump was just like, I don't give a fuck about any of that. And that seems to be the number one thing that people didn't like about Donald Trump. Because he, near as I can tell in terms of policy, he acted essentially as Obama did, right? He wasn't different. He was actually slightly better than George W. Bush, if you ask me, in terms of policy. Like, what was a policy? Like, don't talk about Donald Trump as the, like, you know, fucking idiot that he obviously was. Like, look at the policies. Tell me what policy he did that was out of line with Obama, Biden, any of these guys. What policy? Again, and I'm serious about this. I ask the chat pretty regularly when I say this kind of stuff. Can you think of a policy? What's the policy that's out of line between Donald Trump and Joe Biden or Obama or any of these guys? Like, he was pretty much lockstep with the rest of them. The complaint was that he just kind of was an embarrassing boob, right? And he made everybody, and he was willing to shit talk people, you know? Like, that was actually one of the things that was the most fun about the Trump administration, is, like, some of his tweets. Like, he was insane, obviously, but, like, he was funny, you know? Like, he was funny. He said funny things, and he did funny stuff. And because he's such a, you know, enormous loser, like, his grifts were really obvious to see through. Like, standing in front of the podium and being like, oh, I've heard things about this dichlorocline or whatever the fuck it was called. And you're like, yeah, he's obviously running a grift here. Like, why even bring this up? It's because he bought shares in this thing. So obviously he's trying to sell it. Yeah. We're past the point where people will do anything about it at all. Just do it out in the open, you cowards. Exactly. Like, just do it out in the open. And it'll happen eventually. Like, it'll happen eventually in the United States for sure. That's what happened in Rome, right? During the fall of the empire. That's going to happen in America. That the democratic system will be put aside because it's become too cumbersome, or it's become, like, people have seen through it. It's not useful any longer. And so just do away with it and just rule the way that you have been already ruling, and forget about this idea of like decorum or any of this. Like, oh, there's a guy that released WikiLeaks. He's in an embassy. So, hey, I'm with the CIA. Can I have access to your embassy? And they're like, no. And then you just like, fuck off. And you walk in anyway, because what are they going to do? Right? And you knock on Julian Assange's door. He opens it. Huh? And everybody watches it. They can film it with their little cameras, all that kind of stuff. Who gives a fuck? What are they going to do? Right? And that'll be the new ethos of the age. What are you going to do about it? Right? That's essentially how the Democrats have been running their party since Clinton. That Clinton's ethos, his statement was, well, these unionists and these guys don't have anywhere else to go. Right? They're not going to vote Republican, so they've got to vote for us, so we can sell them out all we want. Right? What are they going to do about it? And all it's going to take is like a CIA director to just be like, people like, hey, yeah, can I, yeah, go kill Assange. What law? Great, click. Like that's it. That's it. Like this idea that like Mike Pompeo and all these guys are sitting around being like, well, we got to worry about the law. Like, no, why? Are you worried that someone is going to come arrest you? Obviously, no one gets arrested in America. Obviously not. That's a thing that doesn't happen. So, like, what are you worried about? Galizia. It autocorrect the Panama Paper woman's name. The conspiracy goes deep. Yeah, exactly. Abortion on the Supreme Court for a couple of decades. Example, Texas. I mean, we'll see how that all shakes out, the abortion issue that's going on. There's a doctor in Texas who actually committed committed an abortion after the law was passed. And so that's going to become like a bit like, and he's putting a lot on the line. Like he could lose his career. He could go to jail. Like it's a big thing that he's done in order to flout that law. And it's going to become a constitutional thing. It'll go back to the Supreme Court again. Presidential memorandum on military service by transgender individuals. All Trump's grifts over the years were really stupid and funny. Yeah, Trump steaks, for example. Yeah. Well, and what it really convinced me, Bumble Guppy, is like there are a lot of people who are falling for these grifts, right? Like you and I are looking at them being like, yeah, this guy's a grifter and this is obviously a grift. But there's people in the world that are just like, wow, hydrochloroquine, I'm going to try that. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's stock up on hydrochloroquine. Like, what do you think Trump's done? He went and bought a bunch of shares in this, or he bought a bunch of it, and now he's selling it to you. Like, that's all he's done. Like, that's all. Like, the saving grace about Donald Trump is that Donald Trump actually doesn't have an ambition beyond be the president, right? Like, all he wanted to be is the president. He didn't really have any ambition beyond that. He didn't really care to, like, take over something or take someone out. He doesn't really have opinions on the world stage that are meaningful. He doesn't really want to organize or do anything. His ambition is to be the president. And we're seeing, and that's a saving grace, because imagine someone like Donald Trump who did have ambition on the world stage. Imagine someone like Donald Trump who had an ambition on the world stage to destroy a country or to foment a coup or to take something over, to do something, right, real and tangible in the world. Like, imagine if one of these actual fundamentalist Christian types become the president. Imagine if it was Mike Pence who became the president instead of Donald Trump. Mike Pence, who literally believes the Middle East needs to be cleansed in a crusade. Like, now you're talking, right? Like, now you're talking. Hey Vince, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. I did talk about the Pandora Papers. Honestly, there's not really much to talk about, if you ask me. It's literally just like, yeah, we know. Like, we know. Like, oh, here's more. Yeah. Like, to me, it's not too much different than like, if you lifted up a floorboard in your house and you saw black mold, right? And then decided, I'll just put that back and ignore it. And then a couple of days later, somebody else lifts up another plank and there's black mold under there. Like, you're not going to be like, whoa, about it. You're going to be like, yeah, like, I know. You know? And it seems like that's the general response from everybody. Like, yeah, this again. Like, we know. Like, there's nothing... there's some new names now. Elvis Stoico here in Canada, for example. Like, but, like, what are you going to do about it? Like, what are you going to do about it? Clearly, no one's going to do anything about it. Like, we didn't do anything about it the first time. We're not going to do anything about it now. It's obviously not an organizational point. Like, it doesn't inspire leftists to organize harder, right? Like, we have stayed as we are, essentially. So, and the person who leaked the document might get murdered like the other guy did. Like, that's kind of the end of it. So, like, we know. It'd be like if you had like your tooth keeps hurting, right? Your tooth keeps hurting, and you're just like, and you think to yourself, yeah, I've got a cavity for sure. And then you go to the dentist. Dentist, charges you $400 to do an X-ray on it, and says, well, you've got a cavity, and you go, yeah, I know. Like, I know. Which isn't to be dismissive of it. It is a major problem, but like, at this stage in the game, I don't need more evidence. Like, I'm already telling people that we should be revolting, right? I'm already telling people that we should be rioting. I'm already telling people that there is not one single institution that is valid in this society. That the entire thing needs to be completely changed and taken apart and rebuilt from the ground. I'm already saying that. This doesn't convince me to, do more? And I don't think it convinces anybody of anything. Like, that's the big thing. Like, that's the reason why it's not like a big breaking, like, who gives a shit. Like, it's not that big a deal. Yeah, yet the ONDP and Greens are silent. Yeah, of course. They're not gonna, like, they know who they work for. Obama set up an airborne disease observatory in China because COVID-like disease was predicted. Yeah, and Trump dismantled it. Then he denied the virus and fecked up the response badly. Yeah, that is actually a fair point, Commie. That Trump actually, like, if it had have been someone more like Biden, it's pretty unlikely that the COVID situation would have gotten as bad as it did. But at the same time, that's just sort of speculative, right? Because we are seeing that a big reason why COVID is being as horrifying throughout the United States as it is because there are huge segments of the population that refuse to do basic things. They refuse to get the vaccine. They refuse to wear masks. They refuse to do that kind of stuff. Latest tinfoil video is ivermectin, zinc, vitamin D, androversol was sent in a small place in China, and they were cured. Sent the research about doctor and how false it is. Yeah, well, because it's because the grifters understand that they can grift people, right? Like ivermectin, for example. I had a document on the show yesterday. Ivermectin, the very people who are telling people to get ivermectin own shares. So it's like, it's obviously just salesmanship. It's just like, oh, I've got a miracle cure for you. Just have my new snake oil serum. It cures everything that ails you, including COVID. You'll feel stronger. You'll move faster with John Sanderson's ivermectin snake oil. All you gotta do is pay $5.99 and all your dreams come true, right? Like, it's new. It's nothing new. It's the same thing, right? It's just happening through television now. Like, that's it. It's just snake oil salesmen, right, who are just like peddling their wares, right, going around hoping to sucker people into buying their bullshit. We cannot rely on political parties. We need to revolt, protest for days. It's gonna be months, dude. It's gonna be months. Yeah, Juliet. Hi, Juliet. I don't know if I've ever seen you in here. Good to see you. Always a pleasure. Sad to hear the leaker will lose their life for sure. That's for sure gonna happen, right? Bring back guilds. They replace all institutions with the glorious light of the workshop and caravan. Ah, yes, the guild. Ah, the guilds. I do think... What do I think about the guilds? The guilds are a big reason why the capitalist system starts to privatize itself and starts to become... I don't really want to say that. I don't know enough about that part. I know how the guilds came into existence and how they sort of took over monarchical power. Like, monarchical power declined and diminished, and the guilds sort of took over power. But I don't really know that much about how the guilds transitioned from that state to the capitalist state and what role they played in that. And they must have obviously played a role. That, like, it's easy for me to see how, like, a powerful merchant or a powerful guild owner would erect a factory and start that kind of industrialization, which is, like, the hallmark of the capitalist structure. I wouldn't mind, though, all the medieval shit, though. Let's bring back, like, the minstrel bands and all that. Let's do it. Yep, Manitoba provincial polling, NDP at 42%, PC at 35%. Yep. Pallister no longer an MLA as of today. Yep. And he's essentially capitulated, like, and they don't really have a suitable replacement for him. So it's looking like a pretty clear cut. Like, Wab Kinew is going to have to do something pretty significant to lose this election. It's looking like a pretty much that election day is just going to be a victory speech for Wab, and that'll be it. That there'll be a couple of holdouts for the Conservatives, but nothing that because there is a real disappointment in Pallister. That what's kind of heartbreaking about Pallister generally is that I do think that Brian Pallister cares about Manitoba and cares about the people that he ruled, and his journey to become the premier was a lifelong quest for him, right? That Brian Pallister really spent his entire life becoming the premier of Manitoba, and that in the end, the disappointment of Brian Pallister comes not for his like, he doesn't have disdain for his people. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. I think he has a great deal of respect and wants to see Manitoba succeed. But at the end of the day, he's still a neoliberal. And so what you have with Brian Pallister is, like, a very clear story of a good man who can't stop his ideology from being destructive. That it's the ideology of neoliberalism itself that destroys, whether or not you have good intentions or even attempt to do good. If you are operating in the spirit of neoliberalism or with the ideology of neoliberalism, what I call the capitalist death cult, you can't help but be a failure. You can't help it. Like, what is Brian Pallister's legacy? That's always the question to ask of your leaders, because leaders will always fail in one way or another, right? Like, there's successes somewhere and there's failures somewhere else. That's always the case. You can always find it. Being a leader of a country is a complex thing, right? But the question that you need to ask is, what is their legacy? What is the thing that's actually going to last, permeate? And sometimes that legacy is not good. Like, Mike Harris's legacy here in Ontario was the privatization of the long-term care system, as well as the privatization of, like, major infrastructure and systems, which has been a total disaster for Ontario. So there's a legacy that you don't want to repeat. But slightly worse, in my perspective, is to not really have much of a legacy whatsoever. Someone like Justin Trudeau, for example. Like, what's Justin Trudeau's legacy? Like, what is it that he's actually going to be remembered for? What is it that people are going to be like, oh, thank goodness we had these guys here, right? Oh. Wow, Amanda, is that... My puppy has been down here for quite some time. I feel like Amanda's on like a half-hour lag. Oh, wow. My understanding was that the division of labor in factories pushed out the requirement for highly specialized guild labor. Yeah, I think that's probably right. That the guilds, like, the guilds themselves were designed to kind of have power diffused throughout the guild, but then individuals within the guild were able to accrue enough power themselves that they were able to separate themselves from the guild and embark on their own thing. Able to buy up land and then force serfs off that land into factories, like that kind of thing. And taking off vacay on the first Indigenous holiday, yeah, I mean, like, I actually think that that's kind of petty. I don't really care about that. I understand why people do, but it's not something that I think people will. I don't think people are going to remember. You know, like that's the big thing. Like you got to think about when politicians do stuff. Like, what are people going to remember? And in the case of Brian Pallister, like this mishandling of COVID and all of this, it was too much for Manitobans, I think. And then finally, like, Manitoba is in the middle of a truth and reconciliation movement that is actually meaningful, right? Nationally, I don't think much of the truth and reconciliation movement. I don't think much of these liberals in regards to it. And honestly, I don't think much of Ontarians, certainly not Quebecers, when it comes to a truth and reconciliation movement. But Manitoba is actually very serious about its truth and reconciliation. There's been significant things that have happened in Manitoba in order to redress this situation that has happened between the First Nations people and the colonizing Canadians, right? And it's been quite serious. And then but these conservatives, especially in the midst of the residential school system reveal, like the mass graves and all of this, they have really shown themselves to be quite tone deaf and quite disinterested in understanding the circumstances. And so I just think that people are looking at these conservatives and being like, yeah, these guys are not the guys. Like, this is not who we want to be as a people. All our left politicians suffer from an inability to imagine anything beyond capitalism because they're not left, right? Like, if you are on board with capitalism at all, you get to be a liberal or you get to be a conservative, and there's no other position to take. That, like, well, unless you want to go into libertarian town, but that's a whole other ball of wax. But, like, we have liberals, and liberals and conservatives are fundamentally allies because they both agree that capitalism works. Liberals just admit that there should be small, minor, piecemeal reforms that happen, and even and now they're barely even doing that, right? Like, here in Canada, we've got the Conservative Party of Canada, which, as of this election, I will call a right-wing party. They used to be well off the spectrum, but this last election, I think they worked really hard to try and just become a normal right-wing party, and I think that they kind of succeeded at it. We still rejected them, but at least they're now on the political spectrum. The Liberals are another right-wing party, right? They're not even liberal. Like, what did they offer this last election? They didn't even offer any piecemeal reform. They didn't do anything. So they're another right-wing party. And then you have the NDP, who are liberals, right? The NDP are liberal. And they're saying things like, yeah, we should raise taxes on the wealthy and do small piecemeal reform in the society, the way that liberals do. And, that's it. And then you also have the Greens, who they're going through their own story right now. But, this is something that I keep saying about the system of capital, is that I actually think capitalism is already dead. Yeah, I think this is the thing I want to talk about. Yeah, give me a minute. I got a chair stream again, guys. Sorry. Super bad to do that on more than one occasion, but what can you do? And then I'm going to talk about this issue. One moment. Chair stream, chair stream. Yeah, another chair stream. Chair stream, chair stream. You like to look at a chair? Here's a good puppy. Here's a good puppy. What glitters is gold in with a retracted comment. I wonder what that was about. Yeah. I want to talk about the very serious issue that is the reality that capitalism has already died. This is something that I think doesn't get talked about at all, that most, even critics of capitalism, are still saying that capitalism is in decline, that capitalism is going through a period where it needs to reform itself, or all this kind of stuff. I take a far more different tact, which is to say that the capitalist system is already gone. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as capitalism in North America any longer. That what we are doing here is we are grieving the death of the capitalist system and then moving on to a new system. And whether that system is something that benefits the populace, like a socialist system might, or even a social democratic system, if you prefer, or whether we move towards a feudal system that doesn't benefit the populace whatsoever, then that's up to us. But if we just allow the decision to be made by the powerful, if we just allow that decision to be made by the politicians and by the owners of the society, well, they're going to choose feudalism. And in fact, they already have. Right? You can see it. That Bill Gates is buying up massive amounts of farmland. He's the largest farmer in North America, right? What do you think he's doing that for? The massive corporations are consolidating their power. These institutions are no different than kingdoms of yore, right? And it is only a matter of time before these wealthy people begin to intermarry with one another, because that's how you secure alliances. That the kingdom of Musk and the kingdom of Bezos will marry their daughters to one another in order to solidify power for 100 years, right? And all long live Princess Musk, right? Like the edifice of the feudal system, the pomp and the circumstance and the ceremony of it all is gone, but the fundamental structure of it is the same. That we are living in already currently today a neo-feudal structure. And if we continue to not act, if we continue to allow that structure to exist, it will just get more and more calcified and just get more and more entrenched and become more and more difficult to actually uproot. And it should be uprooted, without a doubt. And because what we're doing is grieving the death of capitalism, well, the first stage of grief is denial, right? That the first stage of grief is denial. And so you've got a lot of people who are in denial about the fact that capitalism has died. Like, no one's starting a new business. Like, that's, and even if you managed to convince the bank to give you the loans in order to start the new business, well, you're beholden to the bank, aren't you? And should you actually pay off that debt and grow that business to any substantial level, well, then one of these billionaires will come along and scoop you up, because that's how the capitalist system works, right? Or that's how the structure of this system that we're in works, right? Even I fall for it. I keep saying the capitalist structure, as if there is a capitalist structure any longer, right? That the billionaires have bought the political apparatus. They own the political apparatus. It has nothing to do with the populace any longer, right? It is a political apparatus that exists on behalf of the owners, for the owners, to decide what to do with the spoils of their wars. That's the purpose of the system as it stands now. And should the populace actually begin to use it in an attempt to reform or ameliorate their own suffering, they'll simply do away with it. Like, this idea that we will be able to reform this system through electoralism is charming. Like, it's adorable in a way. Like, it's very sweet and naive to believe, like, oh, we'll just come to an agreement and negotiate and we'll pass legislation and that'll actually do it. Though the billionaire class is not going to let that happen. Like, that's not going to happen. Period. Full stop. And there are meaningful structural impediments to that occurring, like, already in place. And should it actually occur, the billionaires will just declare the democratic system over and rule through military force, which, incidentally, if you haven't noticed, they're already doing. Like, it's the only reason we're not actually willing to openly talk about what's happened to this society in this way is because we're still in a state of total denial about it. Right? And there are people who have moved off of denial and who are living in a place of anger, right? There are people that are doing that. You could take a look at the PPC here in Canada. The PPC is outright an institution that says that something has gone horribly wrong. They don't know what has gone horribly wrong, but they know that something's gone horribly wrong, right? Which puts them head and shoulders above the Conservatives and the Liberals, who are still walking around pretending like everything's hunky-dory and that, oh, we can just do some minor reforms and everything will work out just fine, when this system has obviously already died, right? So the PPC is actually ahead of the Liberals and Conservatives in terms of their political astuteness, because they're at least admitting that something's gone wrong and they're very angry about it, right? And a society that moves from denial into anger, right? And then and then you have anger into bargaining, which, negotiating with these billionaire psychopaths, like, that's just a recipe for a disaster. And then what follows? Depression, right? And then finally acceptance, and then the finding of meaning. Well, the trajectory that we are on right now is absolutely a path towards neo-feudalism, if we are not already there. And it will become obvious. It will become more and more obvious. And as a quick response to those people who just are like, oh, just go find a different job if you don't like the job you have, all of the jobs are owned by the billionaire class, right? The share system through the stock market means that all the same people own all of the businesses. That if you are working for Future Shop or whatever, and you decide, I'm going to stop working for Future Shop and go work for McDonald's, let's say, you're working for the same people, because the same people own all of the corporations. They own all of the institutions, right? That and all that's left for anybody, if they don't want to work for these billionaires, is to work for like an independent retailer, who are few and far between, or an independent store or something like this, who are few and far between, and are usually beholden to the banks, which, guess who owns the fucking banks? So the system is a neo-feudal structure. The billionaire class owns the society. They own the politicians. They own everything. And all we can do, if we want to ameliorate that significant problem, is to surround the halls of power with thousands and thousands of people. That's it. We literally are at the stage where we have to do a Bug's Life on it. Where, like, we are a bunch of ants and they are crickets, and we can just all get together and refuse to work for these guys, right? And we should refuse to work for them until their assets are removed. Like, we should not be begging for scraps like the fight for 15 people. We should not be begging for base, meager subsistence. We should be saying to the people who have power in this society, you no longer have the right to rule. You no longer have the right to have assets, to have wealth, to own the means of production. We are removing them from you. We are no longer participating in a system that is structured this way, and we are transferring the means of production to the populace. That is what we should be doing. We're not. And so the steady march into neo-feudalism is almost set in stone. That the only thing that we can do to stop it, we're simply not. So, and it's going to get very obvious, very, very soon. Like, very, very soon. If it's not already obvious, like, which I think it actually is, but the first stage of grief is denial. Capitalist realism is real. I feel like I know what capitalist realism is. Capitalist, come on, realism. Loosely define the predominant conception that capitalism is the only viable. Oh yeah. Like, the people who try to make the claim that capitalism is like a natural system, like, that's the most adorable thing ever. The same thing was said of the divine rights of kings. The same thing was said of fucking tribal chieftains and shit. Like, oh, this is just the natural way of doing things, so it can't be reformed or changed. Like, no, it's just an embarrassment. It's like an obvious act of desperation, you know? Like, if somebody legitimately tries to use this argument, you can just kind of roll your eyes and, like, just make fun of them. Like, that's what I think should be done about these guys. Like, it's such an embarrassing thing to say. That, like, oh yeah, capitalism's like it's the one true system. It's like total natural. It's the end of history. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that's some nerd shit. Like, that's some just dumb nerd shit. Yeah, socialism for the rich and corporate overlords, and butt kiss for the serfs. Well, I don't like this phrase, socialism for the rich. There's a word for this. It's called fascism, right? That, like, socialism for the rich is fascism. If the state reconfigures itself to merge with the wealthy class, that's fascism, baby. Like, if anything is fascism, that's fascism. Like, if you lived in a capitalist society, and people have been trying to convince me that capitalism and fascism are separate somehow. So if there is any separation, it must be this, that if things were done universally for the benefit of the whole populace within a capitalist structure, you could say that it is capitalism. But that's not what happens, right? That things are done exclusively for the benefit of the wealthy, which seems to flout the entire ethos of capitalism. Because at the end of the day, capitalism doesn't actually have an ethos, right? That it has, like, a sort of a pretend ethos. It's got, like, an attempt at an ethos, but it's not really based on anything. Land is an asset post-currency. Exactly, Bumbleguppy. Like, that's what they want. They just want the land. They don't, like, that's what's driving this housing crisis, right? That's what's driving this housing crisis, is that they're buying up all the land, and, like, well, why don't they turn around and rent it at a reasonable rate to make some money? Because they don't care. Because they don't care about the money. Because they know that this economy collapses. How do I know that that's what they're doing? Because all the hedge funds are betting against the market. They're not only expecting the market to collapse, They're doing everything they can to collapse the market. So the billionaires are buying up all the land, and they're not selling it. They're not selling it. They're not renting it. They're literally sitting on it. Why? Because at the end, when the economy collapses again, as the system does, they'll have these assets. And hard assets matter way more than liquid currency, especially if you expect the currency to go tits up, which lots of them do. There's a great discussion of social wealth funds between Rose Rist and Mouthy Infidel, just going over the ways that it reduces the power of capitalist. So a cool middle step. I mean, if you really wanted to eliminate the power of capitalists, you should erect public banks. Like, if you wanted to keep using the capitalist sort of model, but understood that privatization isn't necessarily a net benefit for the society, you should erect public banks, right? Just have a public bank, and let the public bank do things for the benefit of the public. Like, there's no reason to tolerate the private banking system. Yeah, neo-feudalism, the hyper-renter economy, exactly. For me, FDR's policy were proof that this system cannot be reformed, as almost all his social programs have been dismantled. Yeah, and again, Bubble Guppy, I say it, a major mistake of the communists and socialists and unionists of FDR's age is that they didn't force him to destroy the capitalist system. That FDR, when he was on his deathbed, said that his greatest success was saving capitalism, right? He didn't say his greatest success was erecting a welfare system. He didn't say his greatest success was helping a bunch of people. He didn't say his greatest success was ameliorating the suffering of the populace or any of that. He said his greatest success was saving capitalism. And we shouldn't have let him say that. We should have killed capitalism then. And now we're seeing the consequences of not doing that. Right? And the consequences of not killing the capitalist system is that eventually the capitalist system will dismantle any systems that you've put in place to actually help people. It eventually does this. And that's why on the next upswell, which hopefully I will be a part of, I will constantly be saying to people, we need to kill this thing. Like, this monster needs to die. You can't just let cancer keep living in your system. Can anyone save neoliberal capitalism like FDR did? I mean, yeah, they could. Like, that's the thing, is that they could just do the same thing, right? That a protest movement will start, and they can just start making minor concessions, right? Like, they can just start making minor concessions, and people bite on that. People bite on that. Like, if you just do minor little tiny things, people bite on that shit. Like, now it's getting to the point where, like, the concession is that people's voices can be heard at all, right? That's the concession. That someone like AOC is able to wear a dress that says tax the rich. That's the concession. That oh, look, she's voicing the opinion of the populace and it can be seen. That's the concession. Not actually raising taxes on the rich, mind you. Just that it's heard in the first place. Mark Fisher, you should read it. Super easy. I bet you anything, Ryan. Sometimes I read a book, and it's not a book that I've read before, but the ideas that exist within the book have become ubiquitous in a lot of other work. And so I end up reading the book, and I'm like, oh yeah. And I feel that way about this. I mean, I'll give it a look, but I feel that way about this. For hundreds of thousands of years, people lived in primitive form of communism where people lived communally. Exactly. Well, and the natural argument to me is laughable. Like, it is laughable. Because you can look at nature and find examples of anything you like, right? Like, nature is extremely complex. It is extremely, there are many different ways of organizing and how people, like, that's why Jordan Peterson's lobster thing, right, got so roundly mocked by everyone, and why it became a point of major ridicule. because like, okay, so you've got lobsters, but what about like literally the thousands of other species? How about apes, right? How about bees? How about deer? Like horses, like koala, like you can point at every species that exists here on the planet and come up with something about how well they do it. Maybe we should as well. And if you want, there's some really fucking horrible things. There's like, did you know that the primary method of koalas to propagate the species is literal rape? That a male koala will just jump a female koala, rape her, and then she just raises the kid by herself. That's how koala roll. Completely natural, right? It's in the natural world. It's the natural system. Should rape be legal? Like, if people were walking around talking this way, we would think they were insane, right? That's why looking at the natural world for how to configure your social structures is actually a very stupid thing to do. Because you can find anything you like. You can make any example you like. Because nature is extremely complex. It has many different things going on within it. It is a system of randomization. I think that's the big thing to come away with when it comes to the natural world. Is that like the system of evolution doesn't it's not like a man coming and being like, and then this will be here, and then this will be here, and then we will configure it. Evolution is literally a system of randomization, that it will randomly generate within an already existing species genetic mutations, if you like, or genetic things that when we think about it, we conceptualize them as like, oh, well, then it mutates to be more useful in the environment. But that's not what actually happens. That it just changes, and sometimes the changes are either meaningless, right? They don't actually create a more survivable species. That like meaningless things carry on for generations, and they are just there because they're not preventing the species from surviving, but they're not helping the species survive. They're just a meaningless change that has changed things because it's just a system of randomization, right? That random changes and random differences randomly generate and interact with another completely randomly. That's the complexity of the natural model. And so, of course, from this system of random generation will arise whatever system you like, right? And if you point at it and say like, oh, that does it, so that means that this is a concrete thing that we can't avoid, you're an idiot. Like, you're an idiot. Like, that's a very stupid thing to say, and it's a stupid way to look at the world. That like, well, horses do this, and so we should too. What? Or not even we should too, but like, horses do this, and so it's an unavoidable fact of human existence. Like, that's fucking stupid. Lobsters do this, and so it's an unavoidable fact of human existence. It's fucking stupid. Like, it's just dumb. Like, it's just dumb. And we have a talent. Yeah, cyanide is natural, therefore we should all ingest cyanide. But we have a skill or a trait, if you prefer, right? Humans have a trait. And the trait is that we can articulate abstract thoughts, internal abstract thoughts. We can articulate them to one another, have them be understood, alter and change them in the abstract, and then move forward in agreement of the abstract. That's a trait that humans have. We have that. And anybody who tells me not to use that trait is a fool. Just a fool. We have this amazing trait that other species do not have. And we use it for lots of things. And you're generally telling me that we shouldn't use it in order to come to agreements with one another on how to structure a tolerable society. But instead, we should just allow the free market decide. I think you're a fucking moron. Like, bottom of the barrel, like really, really bottom of the barrel. Like, maybe you speak well, but I think you might be thick if you're walking around thinking that, because like to achieve that, you literally have to ignore that humanity can come to agreements and discuss things with one another. And this enormously beneficial evolutionary trait. We really are in the midst of a conversation right now where we are trying to decide as a people if we should use the innate trait that is built within us for our own benefit. That's how far away we are from sanity or rational thinking, right? We have a skill. We have a trait. We should use it. And yet there are lots of people who say we shouldn't, that we should just let the quote-unquote free market decide. And when you actually look at what that free market is, it means let's take invisible money dollars that don't actually exist, that we invented in the first place, and allow the people who have the most amount of those money dollars, which are accrued how? From the exploitation of other people. And those are the people who we should allow to decide what happens in the society. No. We should get together as a people and use the innate skill that we have, which is the ability to articulate abstract thought, the ability to talk to one another and be understood, and we should imagine and create a better world because we want it to be that way. And if you think we can't do that, you're dumb. Like, hard stop. I don't need to be nice about it. You're dumb if you think that we can't. Be like telling me don't use your thumbs. Like that's where this conversation has come to. It'd be like telling me don't use your thumbs. Like what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Like, I've got a thumb, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna grab onto things. I'm gonna use my thumb. Like, oh, you've got the ability to articulate abstract thought. No, you shouldn't use that. What the fuck? Because, like, it's completely possible that, like, orangutans and apes and all those guys are just as smart as we are, right? It's extremely possible that there has been, like, a genius ape who is, like, as smart as Einstein. But he can't tell anybody about it, right? He can't communicate it to anybody, right? He doesn't have the ability to articulate abstract thought. Like, maybe he can draw something, but all the other apes will be around there reeling. Right? So we have this enormous beneficial, clearly driven by the evolutionary system that we live in. It's a gift that we have, and we're straight up being told not to use it. I just don't think I can go along with that. I just don't think I could take that very seriously. Man. Oh, this is a story. You know what? Do I want to end on this one? I will. Because I think this is important that people understand this kind of stuff. This is coming. You guys know me. I believe that what I talk about on this channel is becoming obvious and is becoming manifest by people, by just regular people, like bus drivers and shit, right? Like, not people who are doing massive research, not people who are reading tons of articles, just like literally normal, everyday standard people are beginning to understand that everything I'm saying is obvious. And here's one of these stories. You can't be that disabled if you can work full time. You know what else I can do? Absolutely nothing. If I want to take a shower, I have to take a day off work. Sometimes my partner has to carry me from my desk to my bed. I can't stand long enough to fry an egg. I have to choose every single day. Do I want to cook or do I want to work? Do I want to shower or work? Sometimes I can't even eat food someone else has made if I've been working that day. Sometimes working one day means I can't even get out of bed to pee the next. So why work then? Because work is more essential than those things. How the fuck am I supposed to get the food to eat and water to wash with, any shelter at all, if I don't work? I could prioritize my base needs for a month, maybe, but then the money runs out, and I would just die. A lot of people don't get the reality of that. With the how can you live like that, but what would you do if? The answer is literally just that I would die. The reason that every disabled person you see somehow manages to make do despite it all is because the others are dead. I don't want to work, but it was do this or die, so this is what I do. I work despite the fact I can't work. If it wasn't for my lovely partner taking care of my base needs, working would have killed me just as fast as not working would. This is also why, surprise, surprise, disabled people get abused more than any other group, and why they are far more likely to stay in those abusive relationships. Because if my partner, who I relied on to live, turned around and hit me, it's still either that or probably just die. None of y'all ableds have anywhere near the awareness of your own fragile mortality than literally any disabled person has. There's a great deal of power in listening to the disabled. I work with a disabled trans woman in the protest movements that I am a part of. And she has a power. She has power. That what she is doing is one of the most brilliant acts that I've seen anybody do. The amount of self-sacrifice, the amount of hardship and difficulty that she puts upon herself in order to fight back against a society that is actively attempting to abandon their responsibility to the weak and the vulnerable and the disabled. And we're beginning to see Doug Ford, by the way. Doug Ford is beginning to make changes to disability services here in Ontario, outright with the explicit statement that the goal is to get disabled people back to work. This disgraceful, disgusting human being who makes fun of the autistic, who has already made things more difficult for autistic children in this society, will have no problem whatsoever making sure that people like this simply die. Because if you can't sell yourself to the capitalist death cult, then you're of no value whatsoever. Kind of a downer note to end the stream on, but I wanted to read it to remind people of what the stakes are for many people, right? I oftentimes get called just like, oh, you just want to sit around and do nothing. You just want to, get a job, all that kind of standard rhetoric and all of this. For many of us, the stakes could not be higher. And it seems to me the question I keep asking are, where are the Canadians of moral conscience? Where are the people who are actually willing to stand up and say that what's happening to these people is wrong? I don't see them. I see lots of people standing up for animal rights. I see lots of people standing up because they can't get a house. I see lots of people standing up for all kinds of basic things. I don't see anybody standing up for basic human decency, basic human compassion. Yeah, there's also a super depressing post on our anti-work about someone whose mom just realized they will never stop working, even in old age. Yeah. Yeah. And the capitalists have shown us, guys, like, they will take our children and put them down mine shafts. Like, they will do that. Like, they will make our mothers and fathers work until they die. Like, they will do that. We know they will do that. The very existence of the laws to prevent those sorts of things show that they will do it. And we shouldn't pretend otherwise. Like, the stakes cannot be higher. And yet we keep going to work, pretending like everything's okay, or that it might get better. Funny how everyone could directly observe reality and not require millionaires to explain it to them yet. All the while, the ruling class blames people with physical impairments and their mental illnesses for school shootings, yeah. I'm disabled and drag my ass to work. I know eventually I won't be able to work, and I think when it gets to that, I'll choose euthanasia. And that's a troubling reality of what's happening here in Canada. The MAID program, the medically assisted dying program, right? It seems to encourage the psychopaths to make the system as intolerable as possible, so that the only real option that a disabled person has is the medically assisted dying program. That's what I see. Well, on that happy note, it is worth saying, guys, each and every one of you is a divine being, living in divine energy. These capitalists are spending millions and billions of dollars to convince you that something else is going on, so that they can exploit you for it. We shouldn't let them. Good luck. We're going to need it.